Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, we are 1 minute late. Turns out that both Matildah and myself were attending a different meeting just now. There we go. I was expecting a lot of people to attend here. We tried we tried our best to broadcast or to share the details of today's talk on a number of platforms. Like we asked public relations, for instance, to help us share the details of the talk. But yeah, that's okay. Maybe it was a timing issue here. In the interest of time, because I can see some names of certain important people here. Like I think I see Dr. Mwanza. Thank you for coming. Dr. Mwanza is present. I know these are busy people, so maybe in the interest of time, perhaps we can get right straight to it. I'm just going to ask if Matildah is ready yet before I do the introduction. Can we start, Matildah? I thought I saw Matildah, right? Matildah.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Phiri, in fact.
All right, wonderful. So, all right, this is highly unusual. Usually, what we do, right? We have a postgraduate. We have a postgraduate course at the University of Zambia, which is it's offered in the Department of Computer Science. So it's a data mining and warehousing course. It's offered as part of the Master of Science in Computer Science program offered in the Department of Computer Science. And as with most master's programs, what we have done in the course, I've been a course instructor for the course for the last, I would say, 3-4 years or something. So what we do in the course is, as part of the assessment, there are invited talks from academia and industry. Traditionally, what we've done actually is these talks have, for the most part, involved us inviting people from industry because of the nature of the course anyway. But increasingly what we've decided to do is to spice things up a little, so we also invite people from academia as well. So that's that about the seminar series itself. We are likely going to have the final one, because it's a half course, the final one I think next week, probably next week or week after next. We will broadcast or we'll send details about the talk itself. So today's talk is going to be given by myself and Matildah. It's split into two, and I'll have to apologize to Matildah because I'm stealing her limelight here. Ideally, the talk is centered around the wonderful work that she did. Now, I'm not just saying it's wonderful work because I've been working with Matildah since 2021 here, but she did some really amazing work, and you'll see for yourselves when she gives the second part of the talk. But in essence, what she's going to talk about is part of a much larger vision that we have in our research group. And I'll talk a bit more about our research group just now. But so the title of the first part of the talk, which is going to be given by yours truly, is Towards Increased Online Visibility of Research Output in Zambia. And I decided to sneak in aspects of challenges, tools, and effective approaches, but I'm going to skim through this because in the interest of time, I would much rather Matildah focuses on the work that she did as part of her master's. Matildah was graduating, by the way, a few days ago. And what I also did was I took the liberty to include names of students that I have worked with or I am still working with. Some of them have graduated, some of them are still around, obviously, because it turns out that aspects of what I'm going to talk about will actually appear in their respective dissertations. All right. So this will be an outline of my short first talk here. I'm going to start off by just doing a bit of marketing here. I happen to be a founding member of a research group at the University of Zambia called the DataLab Research Group. The website is on the bottom right corner. Please do encourage you to find the time and look at some of the things that we do, because beyond what we're talking about right now, it turns out that we we actually do quite a bit of other things. So it may just be that you may be interested in some other aspects of what we do. But in a nutshell, the lab itself comprises of academic staff at UNZA and some of our collaborators. So you notice that most of the members, the academic members of staff are from UTH and University of Cape Town anyways. And predominantly students, so both undergraduate and postgraduate students. There's a wealth of information on our research group website. I do encourage you to find the time and check us out, in part because our specialization is in data mining, right? In the recent past, we've done extensive work centered around educational data mining, for instance. I'll give you an example of our most recent project, which was aimed at trying to see if we could identify students that are at risk of failing. So if you do research that involves a lot of data mining or working with data and you feel you need a collaborator, please reach out to us or visit our website and check out more on what it is we do. I'm going to jump right straight into the talk, right? There's a lot that has been written about in regards to research visibility in Africa. I know this article is quite old. This is from 2015, but I think most of it is still true, right? Apparently, or reportedly, there was this article in the Guardian which indicated that Africa only produces about 1.1% of the global scientific knowledge. It's really, really bad, right? Especially if you compare this with, I guess, the proportion of Africa's population relative to the entire world. Now, if your argument is, oh, well, 2015 is too old here, there are other people that have done amazing things. I don't know how many of you have come across these wonderful visualizations. These are scaled versions of the world map relative to different things. This particular map of the world is showcasing the map of the shapes of the various continents relative to their contribution of publications, right? Scientific publications. Now you see that Africa here, in light green here, is contributing far less, right, in comparison to much, much smaller continents. Serious problem here if you look at it from the perspective of Africa, right, the global south, if we can call it that. Now, if we come to Zambia, there are people that have done more recent interesting studies. Today, I came across this interesting paper which has a lot of amazing statistics, right? I want to draw attention to the first table to my left here, which seems to suggest that based on the ranking in Africa, like top 20, contributions of journals, top 20 countries, Zambia comes out as number 13. Apparently, there's about a total of 17 journals that were identified to have been archived somewhere. I've forgotten the platform where this information was sourced from. That one of the places was Africa Journals Online. The table on the right, on the other hand, is quite telling, right? And it raises very serious concerns. I want to draw attention, for instance, for the column that says journals under Web of Science. Apparently, Zambia does not have any journals indexed there, all right? Compromising the visibility of research coming from Zambia. If you look at Scopus, very same picture, right? 0 journals coming from Zambia. Fortunately, we seem to have something in Crossref, and people like, I just saw Bridget here attend, who appreciate what we've been doing as part of DRIGS journals such as JABS, Jonas, and JLSS. I think the deliberate measures that UNZA has put in place to deposit or register publications in some of the UNZA journals via Crossref is the reason why we have that, right? But anyways, you don't have to. I know there are usually arguments that are made around databases such as Web of Science and Scopus, but if we look at one of the most widely used academic databases like Google Scholar, which incidentally indexes great literature, right? You find everything and anything here. Depending on how you're indexing things like your blog or your website, for instance, you will have content indexed here, right? For instance, my blog, my personal blog, is indexed within Google Scholar because I've put in deliberate measures to ensure that publications that I archive on my blog are actually indexed within Google Scholar, right? So if we just do a focus search on academic institutions in Zambia, if you look at the red bounding box on top, what I'm doing is I'm doing a search for academic institutions with a .zambia domain. You notice that shockingly, there's only about 169 results. Now, if you sit down and think about this, you appreciate the gravity of the situation, right? We have a lot of higher education institutions with a .zm domain, cbu.ac.zm, unilas.ac.zm, Mulungushi, or is it mu.ac.zm, right? Nkrumah.ac.zm. The question we should be asking ourselves is, where is their content, right? If their content is online, we've done studies, by the way, recent studies that seem to suggest that their content is not online. But if it is online, then there's something fundamentally wrong in terms of how they're indexing their content, right? The picture changes slightly if perhaps we sneak in UNZA, right? Because those of you who understand, if I can call it the science behind domains, is that if you're registering a domain for an academic institution, ideally it should have an SC, right? If it's registered in Zambia, it would be something .ac.zm or something. UNZA is an exception because it turns out that an important entity called, is it not Zamtel? I don't know why I'm forgetting here. But there's a company that was born outside of UNZA, right? And that's the reason
Zamnet. Zamnet, I think.
Thank you very much. It's Zamnet. That's the reason why UNZA has a .zm domain. But in an ideal case, UNZA is supposed to be a .ac.zm. The same applies to the central bank, right? BOZ is .zm, but it's not supposed to be .zm. It should be something like .gov.zm or something. But that's besides the point. If we include UNZA, you notice that the picture changes slightly. We're moving from 169 results or hits in Google Scholar to about 7,310 results. But unfortunately, it turns out that most of these are actually electronic theses and dissertations. So these are manuscripts that are produced by our master's students and our PhD students, for the most part. And the challenge is that, and I'll showcase screenshots here so that you fully understand what we're talking about here. The challenge is that in as much as a number of researchers at UNZA actually publish, but we don't deliberately ensure that the things that we are publishing are deposited into the institutional repository, for instance. Or for those of you that are smart enough, we don't deliberately ensure that we edit our respective staff profiles, right? With those publications or preprints of those publications. So it turns out that we've, over the last couple of years, a number of students I've been working with, we've looked at, together with a number of students I've been working with, we've looked at this problem from so many different angles. We actually started doing this back in 2018 when I think this was a year into my stay at UNZA. And we did a study which was centered around trying to understand the online visibility of scholarly research output. Picture is really, really gloomy. I do encourage you to find time to perhaps read this work, but in there you will find graphs that paint a really bad picture about the state of visibility of research in Zambia, ideally. There's more recent work which I've been a part of. There's a university ranking committee at UNZA, which in part is tasked to produce what are called annual research output reports. If you look at the results from the 2018 research report, you notice that there are certain things that don't make a lot of sense, right? I want to draw attention to the table on the bottom that showcases the output ratio. So you're looking at the number of publications versus the number of staff. Now, for a person who doesn't understand what exactly goes on at UNZA, they may immediately start making insinuations like, well, schools like School of Engineering perhaps are not very productive, right? Because if you look at the proportion of publications against staff, you have far less publications than the number of staff. But it turns out that the reason why this is the case is the methodology used to collect the data. It turns out that it's difficult to collect information about what goes on in terms of research at UNZA. Part of what we were doing when we were compiling this information is we were going online on platforms like Google Scholar and actually hunting for publications that were associated to UNZA faculty staff. Okay? And so part of the reason why this looks like a very gloomy picture is because details about publications by members of staff or faculty staff at UNZA are just not available online. Okay? A more serious thing that we ought to think about really is tied to the reputation of the institution. Those of you that have spent time to read about how these ranking entities who actually rank universities will appreciate the fact that it's important to ensure that your research output is explicitly made available on platforms that you own. The screenshot is showcasing one such platform. This is the UNZA institutional repository. I don't know how many of you are aware of the existence of this platform. So you can get access to it by going to dspace.unza.zm. But the sad part about this platform really is if you start looking at publications associated with faculty staff, you will find weird numbers like 7 for engineering. This doesn't make sense, right? Because the idea behind an institutional repository is it's supposed to be a place which is used to archive preprints and sometimes postprints of whatever has been published. So if somebody like Lighton publishes a book or a conference paper or a journal article, depending on the copyright restrictions, what they're expected to do is go and archive or deposit whatever has been published into the repository. The advantage is obviously tied to things like ranking, but there's more, and I'll talk about this just now. I know there's usually an argument that some academics will make, well, why do I have to worry about depositing content on the UNZA repository when I have an academia.edu account, or I have a ResearchGate account, or I have, a Google Scholar profile? Well, it's about the reputation of the institution in this case. It's usually sad, right, when you're attending a high-profile conference and people ask where you're coming from, and they Google you up and find that your institution ranks in the thousands here. But anyways, I guess in terms of why you should care, there's obvious obsession, the current obsession. This has come up at UNZA of late, the issue of rankings. I took a snapshot of a Webometrics ranking, and apparently UNZA is ranked number 72. Now, if you look at the red bounding box on the bottom, you realize that what they're saying is that part of what they do in terms of compiling these rankings is they look at details associated with your publishing record as an institution. And it turns out that what they'll typically do is they will try and crawl for this information from platforms that you manage as an institution. So in the case of UNZA, it would be platforms like the institutional repository or the recently launched, UNZA Journal platform. I don't know how many people are aware of the UNZA Journal platform, for instance, right? Sadly, if you have situations where, schools like engineering will have 7 publications or agricultural sciences will have 7 publications, when you know that there's more, then this picture is not really going to change that much. But there's more, right? With the hype around large language models like ChatGPT and Llama, for instance, what you begin to realize is I don't know how many of you have done this, but if you just ask ChatGPT to tell you information about yourself as an academic, you will realize that the more recent version will actually point to sources where this information is coming from. So what I did today was I took the liberty to look up Professor Mumba's profile. And what you notice here is that there's information that ChatGPT has compiled by making use of information associated with some library platform, for instance, the UNZA website, right? And I know that I think is part of, an editorial team for one of the Frontiers Loop journals or something. So again, just more motivation for why you may want to seriously think about making sure that you carefully, curate the research that you publish, right? In addition, though, there's something that we've been thinking about with a master's student that I recently started thinking about. I don't know how many of you have asked the question to the effect, why is it that when we're reading things in mainstream media, right, or print-based media, there's very little written about research being done at places like UNZA? Well, part of the reason is because this information is not available online, right? If I publish and if I do research and I only publish in these so-called top-tier venues and I don't archive my research in platforms that are easily accessible by journalists in Zambia, then it's unlikely that they would even bother to write about my work, right? Anyways, so that's the reason in terms of why you should bother about this. Sorry, I'm cruising because I want to give Matildah an opportunity to present her work. I thought now would be a good time as any for me to share some things that we've been doing in our lab, right? Something that we are planning to launch at the upcoming International Symposium on Electronic Theses and Dissertations, which we are hosting in October this year, is an ETD portal, right? So the idea behind this piece of software, this portal, is it's meant to automatically harvest metadata about thesis and dissertation manuscripts produced by students from across universities in Zambia. If you take the time and try and see if you can find research that is being done by, let's say, postgraduate students, for instance, in Zambia, you will have a hard time finding this information, right? You'd more likely have to find yourself searching for this information on, let's say, the UNILAS website. You go to the CBU repository, maybe you go to Nkrumah repository or Chalimbana University's repository. What we are doing with this National ETD portal is we are setting up a platform that is going to centrally make available this sort of information, subsequently enhancing the online visibility of that specific type of research output. Okay, if you access the domain, I mean, we've acquired the domain through Zamren, who happen to be one of our cooperating partners, but work is still in progress for us to actually deploy the platform. Right now, it's just a prototype, but the screenshot kind of showcases exactly how this should work. It turns out that this is not really a new, it's not a new innovation, if you will. There are countries such as South Africa, for instance, that have they've set up similar portals. So if you go to net.sc.za, I don't know if the website is up and running here, you should be able to see what South Africa has actually done here. Maybe the website is not accessible, I'm not sure here. Just try and see if we can find a direct link to the national portal. It appears to be down here. But in addition, it turns out that centrally making available this sort of information will make it possible for us to syndicate this content to other downstream services, they are called. So the NDOTD, for instance, maintains what they call a union catalog. And the idea behind this union catalog is it keeps a record of dissertations that are produced from universities across the world, right? Unfortunately, if you look at this list, what you'll notice is that there's no university, at least last time I checked, there's no university that appears from Zambia, right? In fact, there are very few from the African continent as well. Setting up the NETD portal will make it possible for us to be able to syndicate content to such platforms. Okay. Something else we've been doing, and I've worked with, I think, a total of about 2 master's students so far, is we've been trying to explore the possibility of making use of AI techniques, right, to try and address issues that tend to compromise the discoverability or the online visibility of research output. So we've had students that have implemented, classification models that are able to automatically generate metadata that is otherwise missing on our repository, for instance. We've also worked with students that have looked at building different types of models, models that are aimed at automatically classifying subject tags associated with specific research output. If you look at UNZA as a whole, what you begin to realize is that we have different disciplines. But if you look at how the content is curated currently, it turns out that they use generic subject headings. So they are not specific to a particular discipline. My profession is, or my field is computer science. There's a specific, classification scheme that I'm supposed to use to tag that sort of research. A person who does research in chemistry probably uses a classification scheme which is specific to chemistry. Currently, it turns out the UNZA uses generic tags like the one you're seeing on the left side of the current slide here. So this work was aimed at doing something similar to what you're seeing on the right. So the student was able to build a model that was able to classify, publications appropriately, ideally. Just wanted to mention here that in as much as the number of tools that we have worked towards, we're continuously working towards with students that I work with, some solutions to these problems are simple. I think it starts with awareness, taking it upon ourselves as academics to take advantage of self-archiving mechanisms that are inbuilt in most of these platforms. Like for instance, if you are not aware, the UNZA repository is designed in such a way that you can access it, register an account, and deposit content yourself. Because relying on the library to do this is going to make it incredibly hard for them to quickly upload your content. They tend to have a backlog of content that they have to upload. Last time we checked, I think they had a very lean staff complement that was responsible for updating this sort of content. Okay, so awareness, I guess, and training. I just wanted to mention, I'd mentioned that my talk was going to be very quick because I want to give Matildah an opportunity to speak about the work that she did. But just to mention here that what I was talking about is a direct result of work that I've done with really talented students. And I think one of the advantages of working in an environment like UNZA is you have access to talented students, dedicated students. So I've worked with a number of postgraduate students and a whole slew of undergraduate students since 2018 or something. So thank you very much. What I'm going to do now is I am going to ask Matildah to do her part of the presentation, and then we will ask people to maybe ask us questions, and maybe we can have a discussion, a conversation centered around this. Thank you very much. Matildah, I'm going to unshare my screen, and then maybe you can proceed with your talk. And I'm hoping Matildah is still online.
Yes, Dr. Phiri, thank you. Allow me to share my screen.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Matildah Muchinga. I'm a librarian at Lusaka Apex Medical University, and I have a BSc in Library Information Science and recently graduated with a master's from UNZA in Library Information Science. So my presentation, this is the title of my presentation, that's Research Visibility in Zambia, Data Mining of Author Publications from Google Scholar and Institutional Repositories in the Higher Education Institutions in Zambia. This is the order of presentation that I'm going to adopt. Okay, so background, the higher education institutions are essential for academic research in Zambia. However, despite the research that is being conducted by students and academic staff, the resulting output faces challenges. That's in terms of visibility and uptake. So an institutional repository is simply a database with a set of services that is used to capture, store, index, and preserve university scholarly research in digital formats. So while there has been an increase in the number of registered higher education institutions and corresponding enrollment rates of postgraduate students, the online visibility of scholarly research output is still noticeably low. This is according to Phiri 2018. I think this is in the presentation that Dr. Phiri has just made. So the expectation is that when a higher education institution deploys an IR, more and more people are going to be using it over time. So the annual trend and uptake of the IRs are expected to increase over time. However, this is not the case in the higher education institutions in Zambia. A statement of the problem. Zambia has seen a steady increase in the number of higher education institutions. However, while there has been an increase in the number of registered higher education institutions, the online visibility is still noticeably low. A common challenge encountered in higher education institutions is the significant gap between the research that is being conducted by academic staff and the representation of this work in IRs, compared to the publications that are available on Google Scholar. So mostly when you go to Google Scholar for institutions like UNZA, even Apex, when you search for academic members of staff that have Google Scholar profiles on Google Scholar, you find that the number of publications and the academic members of staff that have Google Scholar profiles are high. But when you look at when you search the IR, the number of publications that have been archived in the IR, you find that the numbers are relatively low. Okay. So these studies suggest that higher education institutions in Zambia face challenges in terms of research output and online visibility. And there's need for more research to understand the extent of this problem. It is in the light of this gap that this study aims to identify effective approaches for improving the uptake of IR content in the higher education institutions. The main objective of the study was to identify effective approaches for improving the uptake of IR content in the higher education institutions. Then the following were the specific objectives. 1, to determine the uptake of scholarly resource output in IRs. 2, to identify effective techniques for depositing legacy content. And 3, to determine techniques that will ensure the effective use of self-archiving approaches. The following are the research questions that were used in this study. So, significance of the study. It is anticipated that the findings of the study may contribute to the following. It will equally identify the effective approaches and techniques that will ensure the effective use of self-archiving, thereby improving the uptake of IR content in the IRs. In the same vein, once the uptake of IR content is increased, the online visibility of scholarly research output in the higher education institutions will increase. It will further have a positive effect on the international recognition, not only as higher education institutions, but as the country at large. This is worth noting that when rating institutions, research plays a major role in the rating of higher education institutions. And if publications are not made available online, this affects the rating of institutions in Zambia. In terms of the theoretical framework that was used in this study, this was the division of innovation theory. Okay, the following is part of the literature that was reviewed. This is available in the main document, so I'll go direct to the methodology. So this study used the mixed method, and for the first objective, the target population were the 11 higher education institutions that had functional IRs. So there are a number of higher education institutions in Zambia, but at the time of this study, only 11 had functional institutional repositories. And these include the University of Zambia, Lusaka Apex Medical University, Cavendish University, Chalimbana University, Copperbelt University, Kwame Nkrumah University, Mulungushi University, University of Lusaka, Zekas University, and Information and Communication University, and Texile American University. In terms of sampling, purposive sampling was used to select academic members of staff or researchers with Google Scholar profiles. So for this study, mainly our target was academic members of staff that have Google Scholar profiles, because we're interested in finding the publications that they have on Google Scholar against those that have been ingested in the institutional repository. The following steps were used to extract publications from Google Scholar and IRs. So the researcher used Google Scholar to search for researchers that have Google Scholar profiles. For instance, with UNZA, the researcher searched for profiles that are matching the University of Zambia. Then the researcher then extracted publications associated with each author, matching the institution with publish or perish. Just to give an example, for instance, when you go to Google Scholar and you type in the University of Zambia profiles, so you search for profiles. University of Zambia profiles, this will provide a list of academic members of staff from UNZA that have Google Scholar profiles. And once you open these profiles, you highlight the name of the author. So this was done for all the authors. For example, all the authors, all the academic members of staff that have Google Scholar profiles, their publications were extracted using publish or perish. So once you go to publish or perish, you just replace the name with the name of the author, you paste it and search. Okay, this seems to be taking long. Let me try another name. Okay, I'll try Akakangelwa. This is one of the academic members of staff from our department, Library Information Science. So if we get the details for Professor Aka and paste them in publish or perish, this will be able to highlight all the publications that he has archived on Google Scholar. It also highlights the number of citations and the H index. Once this is done, these results are saved using, you save them as CSV. So this is the procedure that anyone can do in higher education institutions, preferably even for librarians, as we're trying to find publications for members of staff in the higher education institutions. We can use this method to extract these publications. Okay, so for extracting publications from Google Scholar, we used publish or perish, and that gave us a list of all the academic members of staff with the number of their publications that have been archived on Google Scholar. Simultaneously, the Open Archives Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvest was used to extract publications from IRs alongside Octopath. So it's worth noting that in the higher education institutions, currently at the time of this study, it was only the University of Zambia that had activated the Open Archives Initiative Protocol. So meaning for these other institutions that had not activated this protocol, we used Octopus to extract these publications. Okay, so then in terms of initial and post-story uptake, the uptake of the scholarly resource output was computed by comparing the number of publications in Google Scholar profiles against what was on the IR. This is because many researchers and academic members of staff will neglect to upload content to the IRs, but it turns out that quite a number of them will upload content to these publicly accessible academic databases. For instance, it is fairly common to have academics or researchers upload their publications on academia.edu, ResearchGate, PubMed Central, or Google Scholar, as opposed to uploading on the IR. It is for this reason that this study opted to use Google Scholar as part of the comparison of academic members of staff with Google Scholar profiles. In terms of data analysis, the collected data was analyzed by creating a spreadsheet for each sampled academic member of staff with a comprehensive list of their publications. So in data analysis, mainly we were interested in finding out for author A, for instance, Professor Akakangelwa, how many publications does he have archived on his Google Scholar profile? Against how many of those publications have been entered in the UNZA institutional repository? And we did this for all the academic members of staff in the higher education institutions that were sampled. For the second and third objectives, the research targeted academic members of staff who publish at higher education institutions and those that have Google Scholar profiles that have been identified under the first objective. So the research also targeted assistant deans research or persons who are charged with the responsibility of compiling quarterly reports, and librarians who are charged with the responsibility of managing. Interest was to find out what happens when they're preparing those quarterly reports. We understand that as a component, it includes the research that has been done, that academic members have done. And we're interested to find out, is that research submitted to the library, or is that research ensured that it has been entered into the IR? For the librarians, we're interested with the librarians that are responsible for managing the IR, because from them we just wanted to know what initiatives have they done? Are they reaching out to academic members of staff? Are they marketing the institutional repository to the academic members of staff? How do they go about it, ensuring that academic members of staff are aware about their role in submitting publications to the IR, and the processes which they can follow to ensure that these publications are submitted to the IR? So this is the sample size: 20 assisted deans research or persons responsible for the research, 20 academic members of staff, and 10 librarians who are responsible for uploading content. In terms of the sampling technique for the second objective, we also used purposive sampling to select academic members of staff who publish and have Google Scholar profiles. Simple random sampling was also used to select academic members of staff who had significant differences between what they uploaded on Google Scholar against what was ingested on the IR, based on their availability at the time of the interview. So, like I explained earlier, a list from every institution of academic members of staff that have Google Scholar profiles was created, but at the time of the interviews, we're interested in those academic members of staff that have a significant difference in terms of their publications on Google Scholar against their publications on the IR. For instance, you'd find that one academic member of staff has maybe 70 publications on his Google Scholar profile. When we check that against the IR, we find that maybe they only have 5 archived on the IR. And these are the members of staff that we're interested in interviewing, because we wanted to find out, why do we have this huge margin? Are they aware about the institutional repository? Are they aware about their role to submit applications to the institutional repository? In terms of the limitations of the study, so the study was focused on IRs in higher education institutions. Therefore, the information collected in the study was exclusive to the selected number of institutions that were part of the study. The recommendations were only to be generalized to higher educations that share similar settings and conditions to those of the selected higher education institutions. The matching of publications uses titles and dates, potentially missing out on titles entered in different formats in IR. This was one of the limitations that was encountered during the data matching. You find that if there's a difference in terms of how the title has been entered on Google Scholar, and there's a difference, it has been entered differently on the IR, these problems would occur. Then the other challenge, that academic staff and researchers without Google Scholar profiles were left out. Some higher education institutions had only recently set up IRs, and the extraction of author details on Google Scholar only focuses on authors that have explicitly used that higher education institution in question. Authors with affiliations linked to places where they did their postgraduate students were automatically excluded. This is an example of where maybe a member of staff works at Apex but did their postgraduate student at UNZA. It means that those publications which they did while they were at UNZA, they are affiliated to UNZA instead of Apex. In terms of research findings and discussions, so this table highlights the institutional repository content status in higher education institutions in Zambia. So this is staff complement versus Google Scholar profiles. I'll give an example of the first one for UNZA. In red, it represents the number of academic members of staff, which at the point of collecting this data was 800. Then in red, it represents the number of Google Scholar profiles. And that's the same for ZCAS, Mulungushi, Charambana University, Lamu, Kwame Nkrumah, CBU, Texile American University, UNLAS, ICU, and Cavendish University. So this table through this table, we're able to see some institutions have, like CBU, you find that there are a number of members of staff that there are a lot of members, academic members of staff, unlike the number of those that have Google Scholar profiles. The second graph, it outlines the publications were extracted from 8 higher education institutions as shown in the figure below. Publications were not extracted from 3 higher education institutions. That is because at the time of data collection, these IRs were not functional. That's for Copperbelt University, Kwame Nkrumah University, and Texile American University. So this table highlights for those publications, for those institutions that whose IRs were functional at the time. Giving an example of UNZA, green represents the number of publications that are available for the members of staff on Google Scholar, while blue represents the number of publications that are available in the IR. Yellow represents the number of publications that are not in the IR. This on its own highlights the difference. There is a huge disparity between the number of publications that are available on Google Scholar against those that have been entered on the IR. We have a huge margin of publications that are missing. And this affects these higher education institutions in terms of visibility of both the authors and the institution at large. So at author level, this affects the H index and visibility of the author. In some institutions like UNZA, where the H index or rather publications are considered at the time of promotion. So this affects the HR index. This is not only the case of UNZA, it's evident from these other universities in the higher education institution that most of them, there's a huge disparity between the number of publications that have been entered in Google Scholar against those that have been entered in the IR. It shows that only few publications are available in these higher education institutions, institutional repositories. In terms of the annual trend of the IRs in higher education institutions, these have shown fluctuating patterns over the years. For instance, at UNZA, the IR uptake exhibited a fluctuating trend, starting at 4% in 2010, increasing to 8% in 2013, and then gradually decreasing to 6% in 2023, with fluctuations in between. So the blue line highlights the number of publications that are available in the Google Scholar profiles, whereas the red line highlights the number of publications that have been entered in the institutional repository. So this on its own explains the huge difference that exists between the number of publications that are available on the IR against those that have, or the number of publications that are available on Google Scholar against those that have been entered in the IR. This also is proof that academic members of staff are publishing. They have a number of publications on their Google Scholar profile, but these publications are not being submitted to the library, or these publications are not being archived in the higher education, in the institutional repository, which still brings in the issues of visibility of research. This is the same with Apex. The blue line shows the number of publications that are available on Google Scholar, whereas the red line shows the number of publications that are available on the institutional repository. So these trends are similar in the higher education institutions that were part of the study. And the study also revealed that IR uptake rates are generally low, with fluctuating trends over the years. At UNZA, the average IR uptake rate is very low, which is 11%. ZCAS sits at 7%. UNILAS is at 0.8%. Cavendish University is at 6%. ICU University is at 20%, Wallace Chalimbana University is at 7%, Mulungush University is 4%, and Apex University is at 28% respectively. So these results generally indicate that the IR uptakes are relatively low in the higher education institutions. This table highlights the UNZA institutional repository uptake, which shows that the majority of academic members of staff or researchers at UNZA have 0% of their publications in the IR, followed by those that have 10%. So it means that if an academic member of staff has maybe 50 publications on their Google Scholar profile, only 10% of those publications are available in the IR, with 80% is minimum. So we only have few academic members of staff that have 80% of their publications in the archived in the IR. Okay, this is the same with Zikas University, where we have the majority of the academic members of staff having 0 publications on the institutional repository. However, these publications are available on the Google Scholar profiles. In terms of Objective 2, these were strategies for uploading legal content. The research findings highlight several strategies that will ensure that all content missing from the IRA is uploaded. These include training and support, automation of the deposit process, incentives for publishing, clear deposit policies and guidelines, marketing and awareness campaigns. So during the data collection, most of the academic members of staff highlighted that some of them were not aware about the IR. Some of them needed training on how to upload their content to the institutional repository. And a number of them also mentioned the issue of incentives for publishing. So demonstrating the impact of the IR on the academic staff will motivate them to submit their publications to the IRs and consider integrating the IR upload with departmental publication journals and research output. So other academic members of staff also indicated that they do not have the time to personally sit and upload their publications to the IR. So they suggested that automating the deposit process, if it can be automated the same way that Google Scholar is automated, that it mops around and finds these publications. If the IR was to be automated, it would make their work easier. The academic staff also expressed their willingness to submit soft copies of the missing publications through email and share links to their Google Scholar profiles and journals with their librarians, so that this information can be entered in the IR. So in terms of Objective 3, these were self-archiving strategies. The study found that 58% of libraries had conducted deliberate trainings to teach academic members of staff how to use the IR to upload their publications. So different institutions like UNZA, they said they have scheduled programs for different schools where they teach the academic members of staff on how to self-archive their publications to the IR. However, during the data collection, certain schools like the School of Vets, when we're interviewing them about trying to find out if they're aware about the institutional repository, if they're aware about their role in submitting publications, they indicated that they were not aware about the institutional repository. So while the remaining 42% had not conducted such trainings, the majority of 84% said they were unaware of any tools that would aid in self-archiving, while the remaining 11% said they were unsure about any such software or tools. The remaining 5% suggested that the IRI can be connected to Google Scholar, which would facilitate self-archiving. This is in response to the question which wanted to find out from the respondents whether if they are aware about any tools that could be connected, so automating the self-archiving process, making self-archiving easier so that members of staff can submit their publications. So the study found that strategies for motivating academic members of staff and researchers to self-archive include offering training, implementing IR policies that mandate academic members of staff to submit their publications, providing publishing incentives to members of staff who publish, automating the deposit process, simplifying the submitting procedure, and appreciating academic members of staff who publish through the IR and streamlining the self-archiving process. Okay, so in conclusion, the fluctuating trends in the IR uptake observed in the data suggest that IR uptake rates have not shown a consistent increase and have varied significantly. Establishing and maintaining functional IRs can enhance the visibility and accessibility of research, ultimately contributing to the reputation and success of academic work in higher education institutions. So the research also revealed that some academic staff were not aware of the IR and their responsibility to submit publications to it, indicating a need for increased awareness and understanding of IRs among academic staff members. The findings collectively underscore the need for further efforts to promote the benefits of IRs and address the concerns of faculty members and researchers that's regarding content archiving and service quality, which may help in achieving a more consistent and decreasing trend in the IR uptake over time. In terms of recommendations, higher education institutions should embrace the highlighted strategies in the study to ensure that the missing publications are captured and ingested in the IRs. Based on the research findings, it is recommended that higher education institutions in Zambia offer training and support to academic members of staff on the IR, highlighting the benefits and importance of depositing their publications in the IR. Effective training and support mechanisms are essential for promoting faculty members to use the IR. So this was one of the responses from the respondents during data collection. Many academic members of staff do not submit their publications to the IR simply because they do not know about the IR. They do not know the benefits. They do not understand the benefits of them submitting their publications to the IR. They do not most of them highlighted that they have more publications on Google Scholar because they clearly understand the benefits of having their publications to the on Google Scholar, unlike on the IR. That's why the recommendation of training and support. It is also recommended that the higher education institutions consider automation of the deposit process by integrating the IRs with other systems, such as publication databases and information management systems, in order to streamline the deposit process. The study is also recommending that the higher education institutions implement the IR policies, which will guide the academic members of staff and mandate them to submit their publications to the IR. The library should collaborate and partner with departmental administrators and editors to streamline the upload process for departmental journals and internal databases with the IR. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Matildah. In the interest of time, we just ask people to get straight to the Q&A session. I don't know if there are people that are interested in what we're talking about, a bit obscure. I know I've spoken to colleagues about the sort of research I do, and sometimes people stare at you like you've killed someone or something, right? But why are you doing that? Well, we truly believe in what we're doing. There are bigger things at play here, right? Beyond rankings, I think in one of my slides, I hinted at the fact that I may have not explicitly mentioned this, but there's a lot of what we do here that feeds into policy formulation in the country, right? But also, there's some interesting applied research which could be of direct benefit to society. I mean, I remember there was a student I was examining who was looking at mobile banking fraud, right? Almost everybody attending this meeting has experienced some form of fraud or something. But anyway, we invite questions. I don't know if people have any particular questions or interest in what we talked about. Thank you. I'm not sure if this... yes, Dr. Mwanza, now we're expecting you here. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's insightful, interesting. I was just wondering IR? How do you even go about it? Because we find ourselves on Google Scholar, ResearchGate, and many platforms, but actually myself, I didn't know that you can actually upload the publication on is it IR?
Yes.
So for me, my question is, when are you visiting our school, or will there be another session in terms of how someone can then just go about depositing the research there?
Yeah, and I'll answer that question because it turns out Matilda she's done now. I think she's forgetting about UNZA already. She works elsewhere. She's at Lamu, but it turns out that I'm part of the there's a university ranking committee at UNZA, and part of what we've been doing. I mean, our mandate is centered around compiling data that feeds into the, there are a number of these ranking bodies where we submit data to, which is why we have outcomes like, oh, UNZA has been ranked number 16 or something. But part of the discussions we've been having is, are there workshops or road shows that we can conduct to try and sensitize schools, especially schools that are adversely affected. Sorry to say this, Dr. Mwanza, but GSB is one of those entities, right? We know that you graduate a lot of students, you do a lot of amazing research. I was just uploading stuff that you co-authored with, Professor Mwanaumo, for instance, on the JLSS journal, but we can't see, your research in the IR. So, but to answer your question, I'm more than happy to connect you with a person who oversees what happens in the University Ranking Committee, Dr. Chitumbo, NS. So you can reach out to me and then we can make it happen. It turns out that it's not a difficult thing. In fact, the library has people ready to actually train you on how to do this. They want to do this because it's a lot of work. Imagine what they had to do just now, or what they'll have to do. 39 PhDs, 1,500 masters. All of those people that were graduating, at least a good number of them, that were doing, is it Mode B and Mode C masters, not the taught one, produced manuscripts. There's probably 2 or 3 people in the library that have to upload those things. Compound that with the research that you are responsible for, right? It's too much work, which is why we have a huge backlog. So I'm more than happy to connect you to Dr. Chitumbo, and I'm sure they'll probably jump at the offer to come to GSP, because I think one of the things they're looking forward to is to identify an exemplar school. And I should mention here that I'm fortunate because our immediate past dean in the School of Education, Dr. Nkata, was very passionate about this. In fact, every time there was a case to do with promotion, especially from the senior lecturer to maybe associate professor, one of the things that he would insist is to make sure that these colleagues would have all their work uploaded with the repository. And if you look at the School of Education, it probably surpasses by far almost all the other schools. So we can talk offline, and I'm more than happy to connect you to NS.
Much, Doc. I have one last question, and definitely I'll send you an SMS.
Yes.
So right now, as I'm listening to this presentation, there's some work which we are tasked to do in terms of reporting the research output from lecturers between 2022 and 2023. We have been given an Excel spreadsheet which we are using to report. And this is part of the work that we normally do every quarter to report the publications that have been done in the school. Is there a way in which we can just directly deposit this same information into the IR so that the respective units can then access without us necessarily having to create Excel spreadsheets, send to the units? Again, the same, again, lecturers again have to upload individually. Is there a connection somewhere there?
So great question. I mean, there is a connection, and it starts with, unfortunately, right? I'm told there's a policy underway. I think it's still in draft form. I don't know if it's an open access policy or something. Something that is meant to make it a mandate for academic members of staff to deposit content. But before that policy comes to effect, I think this could be done maybe at school level, right? So a school can come up with like internal guidelines to say every time you publish, the expectation is you must at least upload things into the repository. So the best possible way to get around what you're just mentioning here is after training, going forward, you can then have people actually deposit content into the IR, because the idea behind the IR is all scholarly research output is supposed to be deposited there as preprints, book chapters, books, preprints of journal articles, conference papers, technical reports, everything. And I know what you're thinking, well, but what about in instances where there are copyright restrictions? If there are copyright restrictions, the way to get around that is you upload just the metadata, and then you include a hyperlink that takes you direct to the publisher website where that article can be downloaded. So it can be done actually. But before people are trained, you'll have to, I guess, go ahead with the manual Excel way of documenting these publications. I know it's painful, and incidentally, I don't know if you experienced this in your school as well, but I know that the complaint from our current head of department and the immediate past head of department was always, there are instances where people are just too busy in the department and they'll forget, right, to give input to those quarterly reports. So you're underreporting either way, right, using the manual Excel sheet. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I'll ask the third one later.
Okay. I think there's Davis, and then we'll go to Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lighton. And the other presenter, is it Matildah?
Matildah, yes.
Yeah, this is an insightful work. I think you've answered in your response to Dr. Mwanza's question what I wanted to ask. But maybe just to highlight, to say, I wanted to ask that there's a point that I read your paper that speaks to this, the one that has to do with online visibility, but focusing on ETDs. So I'm just wondering if that paper has been there and the works that you are doing actually point to 2018 or so. What exactly are we doing as an institution? Because I think recommendations are made, but in your response, I think you gave what I was expecting, that there's a policy that would come. The fact that we have those discrepancies between what is on Google Scholar and what's deposited on the RTs to an extent show that there's actually awareness by those individuals, but maybe it could be the issue of attitude. And in some cases, what I've come to learn, I think policies help. Those policies that would make something mandatory would help, because I think most of us are victims. I wouldn't say I don't know about going on how to go about depositing on the repository. This is something that we should have interacted at some point some years back. And I think you've shared this with several members of staff. So, but it could be the issue of attitude. It could also be pointing to an issue of digital illiteracy. Maybe the library is not doing much. Sometimes it seems simple that you just need to create an account, this and that. But the fact is, digital illiteracy is still high. That could be something that maybe is contributing to the low deposit of our publication on the repository. But all in all, some of us that could have that knowledge, maybe it points to our attitude. But otherwise, I think this is an insightful presentation. Maybe you may also wish to think of a workshop of some sort. You have been doing seminars for a long time, seminar presentation, but the response tends to be low. Maybe try the workshop way. I think majority of us would benefit in that sense. Otherwise, well done, Matildah and Lighton. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I mean you raised you actually touched on a number of interesting things, awareness and attitude. I'll be the first one to tell you that so part of the results that Matildah presented, I know those were mostly based on interviews. But she stratified sampling here, right? They point towards awareness issues, actually. The fact that people are saying, we don't know. But there's also a part to do with attitude. I think there's this misconception. A number of academics who respond by, well, if my work is on Google Scholar, why do I have to worry about the IR? You know, you don't have to, because if you look at the promotion criteria as well, it's agnostic to what is on the IR, right? As long as your visibility can be verifiable using Google Scholar, then you're okay. But they forget that, what does the white man say? You're not as good as the weakest link, right? So it's a reputation of the institution. As far as people are concerned, Davis is a lecturer at the University of Zambia. They'll look you up. They do this, right? There's an event I'm attending in the next couple of days. I know they'll look me up. Where is this University of Zambia? What will they see? We are ranked number, I don't know if it's 72 on metrics or something. You know, so it's a combination of factors really. And I'm glad you you also touched on the issue of, you know, the very first paper was in 2018. We've been trying with my students, any opportunity we get. But the problem is most of the opportunities we get are at obscure conferences, right? Where you go to this conference and maybe you only find one other person who's interested in that particular area. But also, what I have done is, because I'm involved with the ranking committee, and also I was co-opted in a number of activities with DRGS, with their online journals. So whenever we have those kind of interactions, I always do a presentation which points at how bad the situation is. But again, with workshops, you know how they're like, right? After a workshop, a lot of people forget about those things. But I'm hoping that such, you know, seminars, if you have a couple of people attend and they see the value in doing this, then there'll be some sort of snowball effect, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah, thank you very much for your comments. I think there was a hand from Joseph. I don't know if he's still with us. I saw Joseph Chita.
Hi, Lighton,
Hi,
and
Joseph.
good evening, everyone. And thank you, Matildah and Lighton, for your presentation. I have two questions, although you've attended to the other question as you were responding to my two colleagues. So the first one is, I was wondering what ethical issues your studies raises with regards to these higher learning institutions, and especially in the context of UNZA. And then number two, I'm aware about the IR, which you're talking about, and as I was listening to your presentation, I was talking to myself. I think it should be an institutional problem other than individual problem, because when it was introduced, I think when IR was introduced, much emphasis from DRGS was on uploading the dissertation on the part of students and not on publication from members of staff. So because it was made mandatory for students to upload their stuff before they could graduate, that's why we had a lot of activity with regards to uploading. But over time, when that was relaxed, and the frequency dropped with the uploading stuff on the IR. So the question is, what existing policy is there to guide the uploading of stuff on IR before the new policy is introduced? What do we have at the moment? What policy is existing regarding uploading publication on IR? Thank you.
Right. I mean, so I'll start with, and I can take all these questions, Matildah, because they are more UNZA-centric. I'll start with the existing policy. So there's an IR policy. I don't know if you have access to the publicly accessible UNZA shared drive, which has all the policies. So it's there. There's an IR policy, although there's nothing in the policy that mandates academic members of staff to deposit content in there. And you agree with me, Joseph, right? Now, you've been around UNZA, in fact, longer than I have. It's always a bad idea for you to, you know, there's always two options, right? When you're trying to achieve a desired goal here, right? It's a carrot or a stick. You know that the stick never works at UNZA. This idea of, no, we're going to force people to do something, it will never work, but the carrot works. The people at the library will tell you that they noticed an increase in traffic of people going there to have their work uploaded in the repository after the promotion policy was changed. You know, so in terms of policy, currently it's the IR policy, but I know that there's an open access policy which is still in draft form. And I imagine they're probably thinking about introducing incentives or something. I haven't seen the policy, but I've just spoken to people that have been a part of the drafting of the policy itself. And then on the issue of ethical issues, it turns out that the data we're harvesting, right, this is publicly accessible data. It's actually descriptive information, metadata about publications. We did, go through proper ethical considerations, procedures before we undertook the study, but really nothing sensitive was actually dealt with when we were conducting this research. All of this information is publicly accessible. I mean, if we Google you up, the information is out there, both on the repository and on Google Scholar, right? And then I thought it was interesting that you raised the issue of, you provided a historical account of what has happened. I was not aware that maybe there are legacy issues as to why we see a disparity in terms of ETDs when compared with publications, that are either authored or co-authored by members of staff. I was not aware of that. That's very insightful information. But clearly it shows that sometimes the stick works, right? Because for students, the thing is always, if you don't submit that CD and the 4 bound manuscripts, you will not graduate. I'm sitting here, Joseph, and I'm wondering what you would tell the members of staff, right? Perhaps it's like you won't get some allowance or something, I don't know. But yeah, thank you for that. I hope we've addressed your 2 questions on ethics and the policy.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. And I think there's another comment from Davis.
Yeah, maybe just to add on what Chita brought up, the issue of ethics. I think the works that you are accessing with Matildah on her work are mostly, if not all of them, copyright. So even if this publication is visible and you want to use it for your work, as long as you are not reproducing for commercial purpose, you are still within the intellectual property utilization minimum, they say, for lack of a better term. So I think in terms of ethics, unless if you look at it from the other angle of ethics, but mostly this would have to do with intellectual property. So because these are copyright works, there would be no much consequence, unless if you are dealing with patent publications, then that would have raised other issues.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Davis. And before we invite Professor Mumba here to comment, and I used his profile when I looked up ChatGPT, hoping that people get excited about, I should put my things there. I don't know how many people look themselves up on ChatGPT here or Llama or whatever. But just to mention Davis and Joseph, we are all in the ICT committee in the school. If you want, and not if you want actually, maybe what we can do is quickly start brainstorming on organizing a workshop so that we solve this problem in our school, right? Set a target to say before end of the year, all publications that are not in the IR for the School of Education should be in the repository. We can do this. We don't have to do it ourselves. It's just a matter of organizing some workshop or something, and then we invite colleagues and we do a hands-on session. Something to think about here. Professor Mumba, please, over to you.
Thanks, Lighton, and thanks, everyone. I think quite a lot. Now, looking at the number of personnel working on updating, our institutional repository, like you said, right now they have to look at a backlog of, I think, not only these that have graduated now. I don't know if we have managed to upload all the theses and dissertations for those that graduated, let's say last year. I'm thinking, don't you think there are some, perhaps, softwares, some add-ins that can help us to automate our institutional repository, in that it can start crawling into these other systems? I'm just thinking of ways we can automate our different online systems. We have, I think, a number of initiatives looking at performance management system. You can't have a performance management system that does not speak to some of these, outputs. If someone was to report that I published, for example, or your target was to publish 5 papers, in this particular, in your work plan, and then you have published those papers, we have no source of verification other than saying, yes, they did this, and, the appraiser and the appraisee agreeing that this was done. I don't know if that happens, but I'm just thinking of linking all this. Of course, I'm coming up with I'm trying to come in with an idea of a smart campus here, not fully implementing it, but at least some of these bits. Yes, we have a promotion, management system. How can it fit into our, our institutional repository? How can it fit into the performance management, system? How can it fit into UNZA journals, for example? How can it fit into the different components? Perhaps you and your students should also try to explore, these avenues where we can automatically crawl and pick up some of these things that can be, picked up electronically, and the little human resource that we have can be invested into physically uploading content. I don't know, maybe I'm being overambitious, but what would be your comment around that? Thank you.
No, but by no means, Prof, you're not being overambitious. It turns out that some of the things you're talking about, we have experimented with them. But you see, when you're working with undergraduate students, sometimes the work that they end up doing may not really be, at a level or a stage where you can produce production quality software. I'll give you an example. I'm just going to share a direct link to, at your own time, you can look at this, maybe just an abstract. It's a tool that was developed. There's a capstone project that was done in 2021. It's called Effective Tools for Self-Archiving in IRs. The idea was to automate the process of uploading the content. Okay, so it is possible. You can actually build software tools that can accelerate or make the work of the people in the library much more efficient. But unfortunately, you still need some sort of human intervention, because when you're depositing something like a thesis or a publication authored by yourself, the people in the library have to sit down and make sure that important information like the names of the authors, the abstract, and the subjects are correctly specified. The subjects especially, because it turns out that the subjects have to be manually tagged. Right? So a librarian, a professional in the library will read the abstract and realize, say, oh, the appropriate tags are these. Of course, I mean, we've also implemented, I don't know if you had already joined, but I was discussing a multi-level classification project that we embarked upon, which was aimed at automating the process of tagging these documents. So there are tools that can be implemented. It's just a matter of, I guess, engaging perhaps CICT so that they are put into production, because most of them are prototype tools. I mean, they're usually a bit buggy and iffy. On the part of interoperability, systems speaking to each other, spot on, Prof. It turns out, right? Classic example you gave, like OJS. OJS is a standards-based application. The institutional repository is powered by DSpace, a standards-based application. All of these things, by design, they can speak to each other. So it's just implementing that. Sitting down, I guess. But I don't know, maybe CICT could still be overwhelmed, and there are certain things that take precedence, I suppose. So a number of these systems already speak to each other, except for the ones that are custom made. So I'll give you an example, the academic promotions tool. If I go to the academic promotions tool before I'm promoted and I enter all my publications, I shouldn't have to go to the repository and enter those publications. Either I should be able to pull those things from the institutional repository, or the institutional repository should be able to pull those things from the academic promotions tool. Either way, even if it's a two-way interoperability that you're working towards, the custom software, in this case, the academic promotions tool, would have to be designed in such a way that it's able to speak to DSpace in this case. So yeah, on the number of staff again, it's tough here. It's the same as the website, right? I don't know if you know the history behind why academic members of staff were trained to update content on the website. In other institutions, that's not what happens, right? There are people that are paid to update the website, but because there's very few staff that are able to do that, you train people. This is why I mentioned that one of the other solutions could be training, right, on self-archiving. It's not difficult for you to upload every time you publish. If you're attending a conference or you've published a journal article, like Dr. Mwanza did recently, you just go to the repository, you log in, and you upload your content. It's a simple process, a five-stage process, but something you can do in less than 10 minutes, less than 5 minutes actually, if you do it frequent enough, really. So a number of these things, and maybe, sometimes we sit and we attend events like this and we yap and we talk, but then a week later people will start thinking about other things, right? Like JJ has been arrested and whatnot. I don't know, maybe we need we need to draw up maybe an action plan or something. I am happy to interact with people in here, influential people like yourself, Professor Mumba. I can dedicate time, we can maybe formalize some of these things and present them to other important people that can initiate change here. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, Lighton, but a small one now. I don't know, you may have this information. Do we have dedicated servers for for these bits like institutional repository? How is, I'm thinking of, if we're talking about self updating of this content, I'm thinking about the traffic and how many times we would have to refresh. Does it reduce the speed of I don't know how. Do we have dedicated servers, or we have these centralized servers that, when one is down, we know that, when there's too much congestion. I think last time I was asking a question about Moodle, that I think when all schools are writing, we tried, that time we were told to pilot online exams. We saw how slow Moodle came. And I think at one point it even crashed during exams. And I think reasons were that I think our servers were not at that speed where if all students are refreshing at the same time, we can handle the content. I'm just thinking, how is the arrangement of this? Because sometimes I think UNZA is not good with. I know that CICT guys can perhaps request, but then maybe we don't pay attention to the need for these servers.
Yes. Now, I'll speak from the perspective of somebody who teaches computing. I wouldn't want to talk about, I don't want to be quoted here. He said that CICT this, that. Now, you see, the way things work is we don't know. Well, what we do know is that UNZA is in a position, CICT has the capacity in terms of, so what you're talking about points to one thing, right? Computing resources. So storage space, processing power, processing speed, primary memory capacity, right? RAM and all those things. If you talk to people from CICT, they will tell you that we have those things in place. And in fact, the way things work at UNZA is the management of virtually all systems at UNZA is done by CICT. So anything technical is done by CICT. This also applies to the institutional repository. But the day-to-day running is done by the library. So the library has a systems librarian. I don't know if you've bumped into Francis Chulu or something, but he's one of the systems librarian. There have been instances where they've complained that they've run out of space and all that, but I think in terms of capacity, server capacity, UNZA does have the hardware, I believe. If they don't, in terms of geographic redundancy, because what you're talking about in terms of failover plans and all those things, I don't know what plans really UNZA has, but you know that we have access to free resources. Zamren, I don't know if you're aware of Zamren, they've recently moved along Vice Chancellor's lane here. One of the things they've complained about, my students and I have been interacting with Zamren here, is that a number of member institutions underutilize their technical infrastructure. They have virtually unlimited server capacity. I don't want to say unlimited, but the resources are there. High performance computing infrastructure. In fact, most of the things we do with my students, we use Xamarin servers. If we are doing machine learning stuff that requires a lot of computing resources, we go to Xamarin, and all we do is we fill out a form and they provide us with access to the computers. Our website is hosted on Xamarin servers. There's another project I'm running with colleagues from UTH. We got access through Xamarin for free because we are associated with UNZA. So it's I don't know what sort of plans CICT has in terms of redundancy, but I think the question is being addressed to maybe a person who may misrepresent what is actually happening on the ground. Theoretically, it's possible because we know that we have access to those things in Zambia, even if UNZA doesn't have access to them. But the question is there some implementation timeline or something? I don't know. I hope that helps answer some of your questions or concerns.
Great, thanks.
Yes. Again, I'm happy to, if you want to rope me in some of these discussions, because this is how it starts. Right? This is how change starts. Some people may not be familiar or aware of some of these things. So talking about them, or in fact, talking about such things to the right people is what will effect change. Simply having seminars like this one is not really that useful. People forget about this tonight, actually. They wake up tomorrow and they start thinking about other things. But that's fine. I don't know if there are any other thoughts or questions. We've been at it for almost 2 hours. I'm very happy. I think this is the longest seminar we've had. I think that tells us something here. I don't know if maybe we can take one last question and then we can leave it at that. Yes, Davis.
Yeah, again, it's not a question, but just a comment that I think I'm interested in intellectual property, but what we are seeing also gets, what you've discovered also gets to our patent protection at UNZA. The study that I was doing in 2021 actually reviewed low filing rates of patents coming from UNZA. And we are talking about a ranking here. Individuals may say, no, we have our publications, they're visible here and that, but at the end of the day, we want our institution to be ranked. But patents contribute to that because the aspect of innovation, evidence is mostly through patent protection. Now, what's been happening at CBU and UNZA that have patents, you would realize that it's just 2 provisional patents that CBU had and 1 for UNZA with University of Zambia name and with Copperbelt University name. But what would be of interest to you is members of staff that would go there to protect innovations under their name. So what they've been doing, there's actually some applications, but people don't go back there to actually get even a provisional patent. So in essence, you have so many publications, yes, but when it comes to innovation, where we need to produce evidence of being productive and industrialized, even if we are doing well on patent protections, which are copyright, on the other, with publications rather, which are copyright, on the other end, evidence of industrialization will remain high because those innovations have to be protected under patent. So I don't know if that attitude of the same, if we even where we are doing well in publications, we don't want to make these very much visible. I don't know why, but that also affects the issue that we've added on education 5.0, which is industrialization and innovation. So maybe as we are doing that, I'm seeing an area of collaboration where I may come in also and present that idea, but similar to what you are doing, but focusing on patents. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to work with you on that. I mean, it's quite disheartening to learn that there are fewer patents, right? I was of the view that our colleagues from engineering especially had a lot of patents here, but that's fine. That's fine. Any last question or not? If not, I wanted to draw attention to the fact that, again, I don't know if you got our contact details for the lab. In case you want to reach out to us, to me, the contact details, you can go to the website, datalab.unza.zm. I'm going to share my email as well in case you want, this is for colleagues, because again, if you look at the UNZA, because people don't update their profiles, right, our UNZA profiles on the website, it's difficult to know who is doing something similar to what you're interested in. So if part of what we spoke about interests you or anything to do with data mining, if you're running a project that involves extraction of data, that is what we specialize in together with my students. So thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to maybe having you, is it after next week, when we have our last seminar as part of CSC 5741. Thank you so much. For those interested, I will share the recording. This was being recorded, and then I'll circulate it via email as well. Enjoy the remainder of your night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.